guys.
everybody. Chaotic energy to the max is back again.
Welcome to our 4th episode of We're Too Opinionated.
Oh my gosh, fourth
Fourth
episode.
What?
Honestly though, Vitasta, it feels like we've been doing this forever. It just feels like part of us now.
That's right. I think it's a product of the fact that it has always been a part of us, right?
True.
Yeah.
True.
So today's episode is actually very interesting and extremely close to my heart. Extremely. I think today's tally is going to be about extremely and not absolutely.
Absolutely. It's going to be about extremely.
So, all right. So, when we were deciding that this was actually one of the main topics that we started talking about, and that's when we thought that, we should start a podcast because we have so many opinions and, our banters on things. And this was one of the main topics we
Kind
actually
of had good discourse.
started this affair of podcast,
I feel like this episode topic is a year in the making.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So today's episode, just a disclaimer, is going to be extremely offensive. It's going to be extremely honest, and it comes from an extremely personal experience of mine and many others like myself.
Right.
So,
Because Vitasta, you were an international student for 8 years.
Yeah, I was an international for almost a decade. In Gujarati, it's called કે હું ત્યાં almost એક દસકા માટે હતી,
I've never heard that.
Really?
Yeah.
એક દસકો, like a decade.
Damn. And the thing is, most kind of immigration clauses are like you have to live in a country for 10 years to acquire citizenship.
5 or more, yes.
Like I know that one of the hardest places, like Switzerland, is 10 years. You have to live there for 10 consecutive years.
Right.
And yet you're still kind of labeled an international student.
Right. But yeah, I mean, immigration laws are different everywhere in every country, which I'm okay with. That's absolutely fine. That's not today's concern.
It's not.
Yeah, let's not steer away from steer away from the topic. So today's topic, we're going to cover about how international students, we're going to talk about international students from India especially, are perceived in the West, mainly in Canada and America. And I'm going to talk about my perspectives and my experiences as an international student. And
I was going to be like,
Vela is going to talk about. Me too. I think that's.
So I'm going to talk about how, like, I grew up in Brampton, which is kind of
A hub.
It's a hub for international students, and I feel like a lot of the views that like me and Vitasta kind of had argued about at the start of like my stay here was because of like my perspectives growing up in Brampton and having like encountered, I guess, a larger portion of international students than like one normally would. Because I feel like there's just a lot there.
There's a lot everywhere. We are a country of 2-point-something billion people.
No, of course.
2 billion people, right? So like.
Yeah, 2 billion.
Yeah, so like obviously we're everywhere and we're freaking
of
proud.
Course. Yeah, that's not an issue. I'm just saying, like, I feel like because of the increase of
Yeah, and there's a big sorry to cut you off there, but sorry, I'm like extremely emotional about this topic and extremely possessive.
And I mean rightfully so. You've experienced something that you've like
good and bad
for 8 years. Like that's practically your entire adult life.
Exactly. So I was going to say there's a big difference between immigration and there's a big difference between international students going to study there. Just FYI, right?
Yes, of course.
So like there isn't even a thin line between the two. It's just two different things.
Yeah.
Because going to a country to study is a different thing than going to with the aspirations to always live there. Though, yeah, obviously an international student might think, oh, I might live here or whatever, but just moving to a country just for PR basis or green card basis is different things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
just FYI for all our listeners and
Like
viewers,
we're not touching about the American immigration system
or the
nor
Canadian
the
immigration.
yeah,
Right.
we're not discussing that. We're mostly just discussing international student, their plights vis-a-vis the Indian diaspora, aka NRIs,
Right.
and just kind of the struggles on the side of the international student and perhaps the
The
internalized racism that kind of
the
is prevalent.
elitist mindset that NRIs have once they move and settle there, whether it's first generation, second generation, or the third generation, and how they perceive others who come in, you know?
I was being a little bit more
I mean,
PC. I mean, of course. And the thing is,
I'm sorry, that's the word.
no, I mean,
yeah.
we put a disclaimer, like you're going to be a little bit,
Right.
offensive. And I feel like I also feel that I might be offensive, especially if I say the views that I felt, like what
Exactly.
I felt last year.
Right, exactly. And you're true to your opinions, and I'm gonna stay true to my opinions, and that's how we're gonna keep it.
That's
here,
why
right?
there's two opinions.
So yeah, so
Vitasta, as our audience and listeners know, you studied in the U.S. for 8 years, first in high school, then in university. So do you want to tell us a little bit or a lot about your experience and your struggles?
so I think the struggle part can have its own podcast, honestly. And then we can leave the platform open for all the international students to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yes, I was there for 8 years, went for high school, 2 years in Virginia, then moved to California for my college, university. Then I worked there. So I did a lot of things in the 8 years that I spent in the US. Loved every year. I loved my time there, and I loved the fact that I learned to be so independent, and the amazing people that I met and the amazing stories that I have that I'm gonna always tell everybody, like how I always share some amazing stories, and I can't wait to tell my kids one day how the amazing time that I had in the US, right? But with that, I would also like to address the fact that being an international student in the US or Canada, I haven't been to Canada as an international student, so I can't really say much, but I'm sure it's quite similar. But being an international student in India, in America, has a little bit of, what do you call it? It's like a love-hate relationship, honestly speaking, right? So I went to the US at a shy age of 17, and I did junior and senior year in high school in a private school in Virginia. I loved that school. It was so amazing. But because that school was in a small town of Virginia, maybe the students there didn't have the exposure of the world. As Indian kids, we have so much exposure. Like, you pick up a kid here and you pick up a kid from the US. I'm sorry to say this. I'm talking about an Indian kid, all right? Like, you pick up an Indian kid from 5th grade here and you pick up an Indian kid from
I feel like small town is a caveat.
well, not small town, anywhere in the US, an Indian kid from 5th grade there, you'll see the difference, because as Indians, I feel like we have so much exposure and the mindset of learning about everything that's happening around us. Like, Indians learn about every history story that has happened in the US, Europe, Canada, Africa, and everywhere. In America, that's not the concept. History does not really, what do you call it? I don't want to start a war here, but it's selective history. Basically, that's being taught to you, right? So when I moved
It's a
to
selective narrative that's taught.
exactly, and when I moved to Virginia, I still remember a really good friend of mine. We're only in touch on Instagram now, but in high school she was a good friend, and one day she's like, so V, ek to unko mera naam bolna nahi aata tha, right? So like, I went by either Veera or V. So she's like, so do you go to the school on like elephants and like, horses back home? And I was stunned, okay, Vela, can you believe this?
Really?
Yeah, white girls just literally asking me this. And I was so immature back then, right? And you know what I said? I was like, we drive better cars than you. Like, we don't drive pickup trucks. You know how in Virginia, like in small towns, people are driving pickup trucks and stuff like that. Now that I think about it, I feel bad. Like I said that. I mean, that was her limited exposure to the world, right? And that's the reality. We do drive better cars than you do. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that you face racism so like passively.
Right, microaggression.
Exactly. And then another friend of mine, it's funny that I still call him a friend. He used to always come up to me and talk to me in an in an stereotypical thick Indian accent, all right?
Like Apu from The Simpsons.
Yeah, or like Raj from
Big
Big
Bang
Bang Theory,
Theory.
right? He would always come up to me and start talking to me like that. And I would be like, do I really sound like that? Like, I'm not sure. So, the reason
Right.
why I picked up an accent was in high school in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
And then I moved to California and stuff like that. So, in Virginia, I really never dealt with any Indian families there because it was like an all white school and hardly two, three POC family there.
We saw your graduating class.
Oh yeah, you were there.
We know.
Right. So Vela and her family, they drove down to Virginia from Canada, Toronto, to visit me for my graduation. So I forgot about that. We had so much fun. So you saw
We saw your graduating class.
but wasn't it a beautiful ceremony?
It was.
It was so
was.
nice. I loved that school was amazing. All right. So moving to California, I think I got a cultural shock there, to be very honest with you. Because I think in Virginia, I was very protected in a certain sort of way. And then when I moved to Virginia, I realized, oh, there are so many Indian
California.
families here. Sorry, California. And I realized there's so many Indian families here, right? And then I was put up with an Indian family, like a family friend. I would meet them every day and stuff like that. I was still doing my thing. And then I realized, all right, this is where it gets interesting. I realized that NRIs in California, where I used to stay, were so judgmental towards an international student who's come from India. Almost like they would look down on you, because you're an Indian. And it's so funny that their mindset is from the generation that has come before them. So, like their parents who probably moved to America like 25 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever. And thinking that India is still behind, right? And that constantly having to have that exhausting conversation with them. I am not someone who shies away from having conversations with people and putting them in the right places.
We know.
So I was like, where do you get this elitist attitude from? Just because you're an American citizen and you have an accent and like, I don't understand. Do you know what I'm saying? And the fact, I'm so sorry, I'm not letting you talk, but like the fact.
No, you're explaining.
So and then I realized, okay, it's not an issue with just one family. Went to visit my dad's really close friend. I saw the pattern there as well. Then I went to visit somebody else. I saw a pattern there as well. And I was like, why are you looking down on international students? And whenever we would have a conversation, they would always be bitching about international students they had in their universities and stuff like that. And only Indian international students, Vela? And that's when I realized, okay, no, there's an issue here. Like, ये तो अपने ही लोग भेदभाव कर रहे हैं, right?
Right.
It's not a white person, it's not a black person, it's not a Spanish person. It's your own Indian people, especially Gujaratis in America and Canada. They have this very extremely elitist attitude because they are there and they've settled there. I understand, respect to your struggle. But I don't think that it gives you the right to behave a certain way to a new crowd that has come into the country to study and get an education because hell, they can afford it.
Right.
And hell, they deserve it, right? Like,
Right.
so I was just stunned. And these things are still happening today, and it's quite sad and pathetic, to be very honest.
Right, right. I mean, it's actually really funny because when like growing up in Brampton, I obviously encountered my share of international students just, you know, around because there's a lot of colleges in Brampton, and the surrounding areas, and so there's always a lot of international students, especially when you're riding the subway or you're riding public transport. Not like that they can't be there, but like you see a lot of them. And to be honest with us, I didn't consider you an international student. Like
Tell me why.
I don't know why exactly, but when what I had in my mind of what I see as an international student and what I despised, I didn't see that in you.
Right, right.
And I think that may be because I know you, and I think that's kind of what's happening. There's this dehumanization that's happening where people are not getting to know, you know, international students. People are not getting to know them, and or at least I'm talking in the space of somebody who is an NRI. I'm not talking in terms of just a random Canadian. I'm talking about as an Indian who's not taking the time to get to know, because I'm only giving my perspective because I obviously can't attest to every NRI living there, and also because I've been living in India for the past year and a half. So obviously my views are going to be a little bit more nuanced, but thinking back, I definitely did not consider you to be an international student when I posed those views to you last year.
Right.
And then when you told me, oh, Vela, I was also an international student, I was like, what? And the thing is, it didn't click to me.
Because to you, to be very honest, since we're keeping this extremely transparent, right? Because I don't look a certain way. I don't dress a certain way. You know what I'm saying? Like that stereotype that people have. Like it's unfortunately like that heavy accent and stuff. Like I don't even want to say it. Like that stereotypical mindset that the NRIs have about Indians coming to the US and Canada.
It is definitely like there is a term for it. It is called fob, fresh off the boat, and it is terrible. Yeah, like
And the people who use that word, like, do you forget that you were a fob yourself at one point in your life?
and got called fob in school as well. So I think we can definitely talk about this whole NRI aspect of things in another whole podcast. But for now, I feel like it's a terrible term. And you are right. There is we tend to succumb to these stereotypes. Like why, like I want to pose the question to like the world, if you will. Why is it that other international students are kind of more accepted and Indian international students are not? Like I don't understand why that happens. And to be honest, like I also had this bias. Like I didn't join an Indian group in university. Like I had friends who joined, but they were like, different universities. But like I don't understand why we have this mentality, and I kind of implore all kind of NRIs listening to check your internalized racism.
I think I can answer that for you. I'll tell you why. This is my observation. I think it comes from a sense of resentment,
Perhaps, yes.
a sense of jealousy, if you might add. I'll tell you, not in a sense of like how you look per se, but how you are. Because I'll tell you, the main reason this happens is that when a family moves to America or Canada, Indian family moves to America or Canada, and their kids grow up there, they grow up in two mindsets, Vela. You want to become American or Canadian, you want to be whitewashed, go for it. And then the other thing is, you also want to stay true to your roots. So your parents kind of force you into being in this cultural loop. and try to force you to be friends with like Indians only, and don't go out with other people, other races and stuff like that. Be in that loop of Indian friends, and when you don't let other people enter that group, you've never left the 4 by 4 of your neighborhood, and then you all of a sudden are interacting with a kid from India, a country like India, who has been exposed to the whole goddamn world by just sitting and studying in a country like India, to be very honest with you. That imposes threat. That's what I felt when I was
Which is
talking to other international students, is because we don't live in that 50-year-old mindset, cultural mindset. I am allowed to do anything I want to do in my family.
right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not told, oh, these can't be your friends, those can't be your friends, oh, you can't eat this, you can't wear that. That happens a lot with Indian families in America. I've seen it with my like personal family friends, that, oh, you can't be wearing that, oh, you can't be hanging out with these people and stuff like that. And that constant back and forth with the parents, and the back and forth of this generational gap that happens in America and Canada, of course, is that's what creates this, what do you call it, this resentment of people who come to India in this age, like to America in this age from India. Am I making sense
No,
to you?
you're definitely making sense. I wanted to maybe perhaps challenge that a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I feel like there's two notions of thought that are happening. So in America, there's this notion of assimilation, like a melting pot.
Right.
Right? Which kind of does lead to this dual identity where you're not really Indian, you're not really American mentality for kids, who grow up in kind of an echo chamber.
Right.
Right? For Canada, however, it's slightly different, I would say, because there is a lot of Indianness already in Brampton. There already is, right? Like, I'm mostly speaking for like the suburbs that have a huge Indian population, and there's a lot of them. There's some in Vancouver, there's some in Montreal, there's a lot in Toronto, right? So there's a huge Indian population already. So I feel like there's not so much of a fight between the two identities, but rather a repression of repression of the Indian identity that can come out as jealousy, like you said, not of the fact that, like, oh, this person is from a different place or blah blah blah, but like the notion that this person can just have one identity as opposed to where this person
And wear it proudly, right? Like,
right,
yeah.
wear it proudly, and that's, I think, it definitely comes from this place of internalized racism, and I'm definitely trying to, like, implore my thoughts and try to dissect how I felt as a person who thought these things and then retracted from them, if you will.
Yeah,
Right?
and that takes a lot of courage and guts, to be very honest, Vela. And
It is.
thank you for,
it's
like,
taking guts to say it out loud, because I don't want to be shunned, obviously.
Right.
Who wants to be shunned?
right, right.
But it is true. Like, I can't, like, it would be extremely untrue of me to say that I didn't certainly feel a little bit of resentment. It would be untrue of me to say that. And it would also be untrue of me to say that it was just it was just from a place of, like, hatred, because I don't think so. I think it definitely comes from a mixture of internalized racism, a mixture of dual identity. In the case of, we see a lot with American kids where there's, like, a push towards whitewashing. And then there's this other thing where, like, I was very close to my Indian roots growing up. Like, my parents really pushed for that.
Right.
And yet still I don't feel Indian enough. And I think that's where this resentment comes
And
from.
also, I feel like after a point in America, what I've seen is, I'm sure you face this too, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you also kind of hide that side of you too, that you're Indian. You always,
Absolutely.
like, you hide away from that you're Indian. You hide away the lunches, you hide away the accent, you hide away the hair oil that has now become a trend. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the constant
The rep-
repulsion.
no, it's the constant repression of like absolutely. I did not
Yeah.
take Indian lunches
Yeah.
until I was well into like, you know, high school.
Right.
And even then it was like rice and dal, which is like the most basic of
Yeah.
Indian lunches.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the other table, you see an international student devouring that fucking rice and dal and just enjoying with no worry of the world, right? Like
Right.
international students in America is a very complicated subject, and I'm mainly speaking from my experiences, my observations, and my interactions with people there in the US, right? International students, now it has become a trend for going for undergrad also. Pehle to it was only just for masters, and hopefully you get a job there, you settle there, or you come back. Now there's this whole concept of brain gain instead of brain drain that had happened for years in India, that all of these smart people would go to the US or Canada, settle there, you know, because they get paid much more than they would get paid here, which is fair, all right. Now when you're dissecting that, international students, when they go there, a lot of these employers know that they are international students, right? And they will shamelessly abuse, in a way, like exploit them, like they'll pay them less. And I am completely against all those international students who work illegally in the US. Like I do not support that.
Obviously.
And that
Yeah.
that takes a toll on any country's economy, and I have never supported that. I never did an illegal job in the US, and I know a lot of people who did, and I would always try to talk them out of it, because A, it's wrong. B, if you get caught, the repercussions of that are extremely serious. Like you are literally hindering your future. But now that loophole of illegal jobs that international students do to survive there, that is because international students के जो laws है वहाँ about working are so hard compared to a country like Canada.
Still, even in Canada, it's quite terrible.
Because in America, I don't know
Yeah.
about Canada. In America, if you get a campus job, cool, you can only work 20 hours a week, and you cannot get an outside job while being an international student on a status. I think in Canada you can work. Yeah, so it's
But
not the same.
It's not the same, but you can only work, I think, a
40
certain
hours. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
work 40 hours, which is almost full time, Bela. So
That's true.
that's
There is a
trust
huge
me. I've done my research. So like international students in America have it extremely hard, because they are not allowed to work outside campus while they are on their F1 status, and if they get a job on campus, it's only 20 hours a week, or 22, correct? I don't remember. Yeah, I used to work on campus. I don't remember how many hours it was. I think
Basically, it's not enough to survive.
it's definitely not enough to survive. So you are being sponsored by your parents, or you're trying to make your ends meet. Now let's say if you decide to do an illegal job, working at a restaurant, working at a motel, doing small chores and stuff like that here and there, trying to earn that. Your employer, Vela, the employers know that these are international students from India, and we are going to exploit them. They will make them work like freaking asses, and pay them minimum wage, and just literally, and even not that, like one of my best friends was hired for a job post her graduation and masters, and he was an Indian employer, all right, and she was on a legal status to work in America. He literally exploited her in a way that he hired her as a business analyst for the job, and then made her do like Costco chores and like administrative work, and she was so confused, like because he thought she's an Indian, and because Indians have this mindset of do it, we will do anything that's thrown along our way,
Yeah.
right? Like we will do it, like kill it or go. What is that phrase?
There's this level of sincerity in terms of work.
Extreme, because they know how hard it is to get there, dude. It's like 1 rupee equals like 80, like $1 equals 82 rupees. Like, just do the math.
It's too
Just
much
being
math.
there, just being there is so extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, oh, kisne bola tha jaane ke liye. I'm not saying that. Yeah, but you're there. But like, when you're going there and you're putting in so much money into the economy of a country, and you are accepting international students, we are paying so much money to the universities, even state school, where you're practically going for free. The international students are literally funding your school.
Absolutely.
And then isme my problem is during all of this process, it's the Indians in the US that actually bring you down.
And I think speaking of exploitation, like I just recently, from a neighbor, they told me a story of how their daughter, who's an international student, who in Canada is being exploited even though she's working legally, right?
Imagine.
Like it's not even like under the table job or anything. It's a legal job, but still she's getting exploited by her Indian employer. And I think that just shows that there is just either
Lack of respect.
a lack of respect for just you know Indian international students as a whole.
Exactly. And you won't see this racism, this internalized racism from NRIs towards other international students like Koreans and Chinese and like Taiwanese and other even international students from like South Africa and stuff like that, because they are not Indians, and they are Indians have this huge issue of always appreciating light skinned people. I'm sorry I said it.
I agree with you, but I don't know. Perhaps it's
Like they
like,
will.
I don't think I don't think that thought has ever come
No,
to
no,
me.
I'm sure, obviously not, because I know, Vela, that we've not been raised like that. I know that. I know that. But
So I
like,
can't speak to if anybody has ever had that thought, but I definitely think there is not just internalized racism in terms of NRIs, but I think there's definitely a
Colorism, yeah.
that happens overall,
Right,
even from
right,
non-Indians,
right,
obviously,
right.
but like
It
from
hurts
both
more when it comes from your own people, no? But
no, but that's why we're talking
yeah,
about this, right?
yeah,
Like we're talking
yeah.
about this because there is a huge population of international students. You were an international student.
The amount of racism I faced, Vela, like, it's beyond me.
I'm sure. I'm
It's
sure.
beyond me. And sometimes even those comments, oh, you don't look Indian.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't even sound like an Indian.
Yeah, where like honestly, like if we talked about
You look like a
microaggressions about racism, like we
that
can go on
would boil my
forever.
blood. Like,
You
bro,
don't
I'm a
have
proud
an-
Indian, man. I am a proud Indian.
And
Like,
to be honest with us, though, like I think there's definitely this notion of hating your Indianness as an NRI because of all of this racism.
exactly. So it's not really their fault too, but if it is your fault if you continue the cycle.
Absolutely,
Right?
absolutely.
If you don't break it, like how I had a
Absolutely.
conversation with Vela, like how I had a conversation with you, and you were like, it made you realize something that you
It-
never, that you had never thought of,
And
right?
the thing is, it does blow your mind because
Right.
we like, especially nowadays where being like trying all these Indian things has become a trend. It makes you realize all the like stuff that happened to you as a child. Like for me, and at least for my friends, I'm sure that they relate. Like we didn't oil our hair because oh my gosh, the smell of like coconut oil or the smell of like any sort of oil or
Right.
like that slicked backness. Like I'm sure the struggles of NRIs are very different. from
Very
intern-
different. And I mean, you pick up a kid from one place and put them somewhere else and expect them to learn everything. That's hard, dude. That's very hard. So I do sympathize there. But the fact that you grow up
it's
and then
yeah.
you kind of do the same thing.
No, it's important to break the cycle and
right.
and understand that it's
Right.
not it's internalized racism
Right.
that you need to kind of break free from because yeah, like what is the question, like where did you get this accent from? Like I got that all the time in high school. Like, oh, you don't sound like you immigrated from India. You sound like you were born here. But like,
Like if you freaking take
I'm
a
sorry?
child at the age of 5 and you put them in a country like Canada where there's an where there's a accent, the kid is going. If you picked up Vela from India and put her to Korea, she would have a Korean accent. That's what happens. That's what happens, dude. That's literally like
I mean,
freaking.
I could still pull off a Korean accent.
You can, because you're talented. But I'm just saying, like, if I,
Sorry, I'm
if
trying
I
to wink
take
at
my
the
kids to
camera.
freaking Mexico tomorrow, obviously they're gonna have a perfect Spanish accent.
But I think we forget that English has been introduced to so many different countries that it has different words, different accents in all around the world, like South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, obviously England. America has its own weird accent.
India.
India has its like, I was just getting there. I was getting there. Like every country, like even Japan and Korea have their own version of English, which
Right.
is English,
Yeah.
which is just like a Korean or a Japanese way of saying English, like speaking English, which is there's nothing wrong with it because accents at the end of the day kind of show bravery. And to be honest, with
I was about to say that, Vela. It's the quote. I quote that I said in the second episode. Accent is a sign of bravery.
yes,
Yeah.
I see I'm learning.
There you go.
And the thing is, it's absolutely true because I did not appreciate my mom's English accent until I started learning Korean.
See?
Because I was learning something different, I started realizing, oh, why am I not proud of my Indianness? Because you see this united country.
And there is no true accent to one, like there is no one accent.
Absolutely.
In
yeah.
India, there is no one accent. Like it really depends on the it really depends on the state language they're speaking. Like if you listen to my mom talking in English, if you know India well, you know she's from Kashmir. Because Kashmiris have a very different type of accent when they're talking in English. There are certain pronunciations of words is very different. You go to South India, you listen to people talking in English there because of their language is so even. You know how you say a cursive handwriting? Their language is a cursive language. So when they're talking in English, it almost sounds like that. Can you talk in 2 or more languages and then like have a freaking proper accent? There is no proper accent. The concept is put by us that, oh, America does not have an accent.
It doesn't.
Like
It doesn't.
like literally you go to the south, there's a different accent. You're in the valley and you have a Cali accent,
Like a Valley girl accent. Then
yeah,
there's
the New
Washington,
Jersey
the
New Jersey accent.
Then there's not even the South, but then there's like.
So
the
my
North.
point is,
Sorry,
why are international students expected to have a kind of an accent, and when they don't have it, you're like, oh, you don't sound Indian. Like, what kind of a BS is that? So, this podcast can go on forever because there are so many facets to this topic. And I understand it's a very extremely sensitive topic, Villa, and thank you for actively participating in it. And I really, as an ex-international student, I really appreciate it because I would have always wanted someone in America who was there to guide me and show me the right path and show me the right people to hang out with and grow with. And I'll tell you honestly, like I said, I've made some amazing friends in college and university, and I'm always going to be grateful for that experience.
Right.
But I'm never going to forget the things that I faced as an international Indian student in the US.
Right. And
whether
I feel
it's
sorry, go on.
whether it's microaggression, whether it's racism, whether it's internalized colorism from the Indian community, whatever, that will never be forgotten. And I really want, I want all of that to stay with me so that I can talk to people from different communities, especially NRIs who've come to India, or I can go there and have a conversation about it, like why this is an issue.
Right, because I guess I'm currently just gonna give a little bit of a reality check to NRIs, if you will, as a fellow NRI, where we don't realize that the racism that we faced is what we are doing to other people.
Right.
Right, and I think that's important to check our internalized racism, understand the privilege that we probably immigrated as children, as a lot of NRIs did, or obviously the NRI kids that I'm talking to right now, like we immigrated as kids. So all the stuff that we faced as children is exactly what we are doing to these international students if we continue on and keep up with kind of holding on to the resentment, holding on to this notion of like why are they here, this that, and I think it's also important to take into account not just the stuff that we faced as kids, but what our parents faced, because I know that a lot of our moms, even our dads, don't have the correct accents for like being a Canadian, but like they're just as equally Canadian as us, but they were also looked down on. So why are we doing the same? Like I think we need a reality check or a kind of a understanding of where our racism comes from. Take that into account, take that into stock, and understand that just because somebody is from somewhere else or from India, like I don't know, you don't know where your resentment is coming from. Take it stock, understand where it's coming from. If you know where it's coming from,
Try to have a conversation.
have a conversation. Like, yeah, I know that I'm being a little, like I'm calling people out, but the reason that I have these views right now is because I did get called out last year. I did get called out and was told to examine my biases. And I think it's always important to understand where you're coming from or where your biases are coming from.
Right.
Because for me, they came from a place of being like told to repress my Indianness for so long.
Right. And that's absolutely true, Villa. Thank you for sharing that and being so honest and vulnerable about the conversation, because that's exactly what this podcast is supposed to do with everyone who's listening and watching, is that if you ever faced or if you ever been the oppressor sort of ways, is that, maybe let this be a reality check. And I appreciate all the Indians living in the US and Canada, those who have helped other Indian kids who've come into their families or neighborhoods or whatever. Like a dear uncle of mine, he always makes it a point to help anyone. Like, whenever he gets a call, he'll be like, oh, this international students need help. That person needs help. He needs money. Oh, he needs a job. Let me see which university he's working at. Let me help him get a job on campus or something like that.
Right,
He's
yeah.
always been that kind of a vigilante for
Yeah.
international students in his community. And I really appreciate people like that, because you need someone like that, dude. Like, see, if you come from a privileged place in India, transitioning into America wouldn't be that hard. But if you've come from a place where you are going to America with an American dream, and you want to settle there, you want to send money back home, I know your life is going to be hard, because
Yeah.
you're going to do anything to make the ends meet.
Yeah, and I think like that uncle, that reminds me of my dad. Like my dad works in human resources, and I know that a lot of times he comes home and he has like calls from different family friends saying, hey, this person just moved here, can you help them with their resume, can you help them prepare
Right.
for an interview, do you have like a job opening, because he obviously works
Right,
in HR,
exactly.
right? And I know a lot of times, like even though he may have like times where he's not able to hire somebody, he always tells me like I try to guide them like, hey, improve your English in this way, improve your English in that way, to kind of facilitate job hiring.
And it's kind of sad that, I understand, I mean, whoever's going to America is going to have some basic knowledge of English, but like the fact that you don't get picked up just because your English is not English enough for,
Right, of
right,
course, of
like for a
course.
position, like if you and I were being interviewed for the same position, because you are a citizen you'll be picked, or over just because of the accent or something like that.
Yeah, there is definitely all sorts of biases when it comes to the
Right.
hiring
And
process.
F1 status is very, for international students, F1 status is extremely
Precarious.
it is. And also I really wanted that, again, like I said, I can go on and on about things that international students should and should not do in the US.
Maybe you should perhaps write a blog.
I will. Maybe I will. And maybe I really want to start a service sector for international students, because I know they get exploited so much and my heart aches for them. Because when you don't get proper guidance, you can just steer into the wrong direction and your life can be ruined.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of crime syndicates. I'm saying as if like I know all these mafia bosses, but like there's definitely a lot of you know, like people who are involved in crime. So crime syndicates basically, who take advantage of international students and they kind of prey upon those places where international students are.
I think this is a big issue in Canada
It is.
compared to like other states
It
in America.
definitely is a huge issue in Canada. Like there's multiple stories that come out of like psychiatrists who come and say that, hey, you know, like we had this international student saying that she was forced into prostitution.
Oh God.
And she was brought here on the guise of being an international student, but then was forced into like, you know, sex trafficking. So like there is huge, like, that's a huge thing.
Right.
Right,
And I feel like there is no safety net, if I must add, for the international students. There's no stock of information for international students, and like there are no communities. Like, you know, I know in universities have like this international groups.
Yeah.
Like it's not uniform thing all over.
Right.
Imagine if there's a uniform thing in all universities across America. So it's not like a union, but sort of kind of a way, and that way you keep a stock of international students, who's doing what, in a sense way, like everyone's doing okay and stuff like that. I really wanted like where I could like just like debrief about how my things are doing. I get free consultations on how to fill out a form, how to do my taxes, how to do this. Okay, these resources are available on campus, but being an Indian international student, that's what I'm saying. Like that particular, especially because you're spending so much money being at the university.
Yeah, I feel like there definitely should be like every university that I know of, like, and maybe that's particular to Canada, or at least the only two universities that I know had Indian associations.
No. We didn't have any Indian association in our university.
Like I'm sure, like I believe you. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like I'm surprised that there isn't one.
Yeah.
Right?
That's not a, yeah.
Or even just like a foreigner or like an
Yeah,
international.
that's what I said. There was an international student office, Vela, but there was no, there weren't any specific programs designed to help international students.
it was just
It was just like a coffee break. It was just like, you know what I'm saying, like all these lousy ass things.
Right, there was
and-
no sense of mentoring.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have hired non-international students in their staff. They've hired freaking normal staff. How is the staff going to relate to the international students?
That's true.
Like that's just not happening.
That's like saying that an old white man can run America when most of the population isn't an old white man.
Yeah. That's what she said.
I said what I said. I'm Canadian. You can't do anything to me. I'm not American.
Neither am I, but but yeah.
I said
so
what I said. Don't, no, I'm scared now. Please don't nuke me. I don't live alone. I live with people.
So yeah, really hope international students relate to, and I know I can say much more. I could go on for another 5 hours, but like you get it. Like you know, if you're an international student, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Like I am talking to you. You're doing a great job. And if you're having any kind of trouble, just DM me. I can connect you to the right sources in America. So this is an open platform for all the international students watching this. If you need any help, please DM me and I will help. Please.
Even if you need Canadian help.
Do not hesitate. Do not.
I thought you were going to say don't message her.
No, why should I say that? Please message her because then I'll help her help you.
Like, I know that I'm not an international student, but like I definitely
But we would appreciate any help that we get, especially
Yeah.
from the Indian community.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I definitely know a lot of Indians.
Okay, great. Amazing. So,
I
yeah.
mean, it's funny because obviously I know a lot of Indians as I'm living in India.
So this is just a personal message to all the international students watching from a fellow international student or ex-international student is that you're doing a great job. Continue the hard work, and if you ever need help, do not hesitate to ask. Don't worry about that accent. Don't worry about the dollars. They are going to come in, and be true to yourself. Refrain from indulging into any legal activities because there are so many out there. You'll fall into the wrong one and then ruin your career in the US. So yeah, feel free to
US
message
and
me.
Canada. Like,
US and Canada.
if
And
you ever like, if you need help, there are ways to get out of things. Like, be strong.
that's right. Be strong.
And fellow NRIs, let's check our bias a little bit.
Please check your biases. Please. I
I'm
would-
trying to lighten the mood a bit because we definitely talked about something really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We did. Trust me.
It's really hot in
It
here.
boils my blood.
Not because of the heat, but just in general.
No,
But this was a topic that definitely needed to be said and needed to be talked about because it's something that Vitasta feels really closely about. Like, she feels very strongly about this. And it was one of the first things that me and her discussed when I first, decided to stay back. And
Right.
like, even before I decided to stay back, like, me and her would have these conversations just like sitting opposite from like one sofa to the other in her living
Yeah.
room, just having discussions about international students. And it's important to her, and I'm really glad that we were able to bring this topic to you through this podcast.
no, and thank you so much for being a part of it and being being so honest about your perspectives on it and being so vulnerable by being, open to all your fellow NRIs too. So
No,
it is very important.
I think it's important because I feel like because my mind was able to be changed, I know for a fact that the people that I know and even just other NRIs who I don't know, like, I know that their mind can also be changed because of the points that I put forth.
Yeah, definitely. So guys, thank you for joining us today. I hope you really liked our
Fourth episode.
fourth episode, and we hope that you share your views. And I hope you noticed that we didn't have any iPads on us today because there was no research, because it's all personal experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So no sources in the description.
No sources in the description.
But do like, share, and subscribe, please. We love that our community is slowly and gradually growing.
Yes.
If you haven't checked out our last episode on imposter syndrome,
Please make sure you do.
please make sure you do, and do share. If you know any international student, please share our podcast with them so that they know that they're not in this alone.
Yes. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure that you rate our podcast and follow our podcast page to
Stay
never
updated.
to never miss an episode.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye. Toodles.
Toodles.